Okay, so I'd like to welcome you all to the Arkansas Forestry Commission's Forestry Workshop here at the Real Life Conference. The first part of the workshop is to talk about a special project that we have going that's called Keeping It in the Family. And so what this project is, it's through the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. They had a grant, some grant funds, and they put together a sustainable forestry and African American land retention project. And so several agencies in the state have been working together to try to get this funding here for Arkansas landowners. And we've been working hard to get it since 2012. And so since 2012, we weren't successful the first time. So after we kind of brushed and licked our wounds, we got back together and reapplied the next time the funding came available, which was 2016, and we were funded. So UAPB is actually the lead agency in the project. And Arkansas Forestry Commission, Natural Resources and Conservation Services, Arkansas Conservation Districts, Arkansas Land and Farm Development, Silas H. Hunt CDC, UALR Bowen Law, School of Law, and Centers for Arkansas Legal Services. So these are all the partners that's been working together on this grant. The project is funded for 7 counties within the state. And those counties are Columbia, Hempstead, Howard, Little River, Washita, Nevada, and Union. The project the period is from October 2016, and it'll go through September 2018. So this is the first opportunity that I'm aware of to assist African American landowners with clearing up heir property. So this project has funding to help landowners get things straight so that they can implement projects on their land. And you all may be aware of if there's heir properties or several heirs on a land, it can kind of tie things up when it comes to applying for funding, with cost share programs. But what we're trying to help people do is get them in a position where they can go in and apply for funding and get things done. So some of the goals here is heir property mediation, heir property resolution, one-on-one forestry management assistance, forest management plans, enrollment in EQIP, Conservation Reserve Program, Southern Pine Beetle Program, and now is it CSP included too? Okay, so Conservation Stewardship Plan. So financial assistance for legal work and to apply forestry improvement practices is now available. And like I said, it's through 2018, so it's just a limited amount of time, but we are working together to try to figure out how we can sustain this project, because it's a great effort and we want to continue helping landowners. It's not just the African American thing, although that's what this project is for. We understand that there's others that could benefit from this help too. So the project allows for a full-time outreach coordinator that works under Dr. English, and she's not here. If she is, I'll point her out to y'all. And also a full-time forester. So this forester will work with you as landowners, and he'll work with us as an agency to provide technical services, site visits, educational services, and other type of things. And all this is free. Because of the grant, it's going to be free to landowners. Yes, sir.
Is that only limited to the counties that you call out?
Yes, sir. At this time, that's the project area. So like I said, we are looking to sustain this project, and so maybe expand this project as well. Okay, but go ahead, Dr. English.
Yes, it is basically limited to those counties, but we're not overwhelmed with a lot of requests right now. So right now, if there's someone outside those areas that requests some assistance, we can do it now. If we become overwhelmed in those particular counties, then we won't. But right now, we can help people outside those counties.
So ones are actually, you all here are actually in advantage right now because the project is new. We're just getting started. And so, you know, while funding it's available right now, you know, as people hear about this project, because there's a lot of interest in it. Once people start hearing about the project, then funds may become limited. So we advise you, if you're interested, get more information and come to the meetings where you can learn more about the project and hear from the different agencies and how they support the projects and get signed up. Okay, so there's been 3 workshops, Keeping in the Family. That's the name of the project. There's been 3 workshops held thus far in Camden, Hope, and Magnolia. Okay, so are there any questions on the project thus far? Yes, sir. Okay, the counties are Columbia, Hempstead, Howard, Little River, Washita, Nevada, and Union. But as Dr. English said, it's open right now to other counties. I think we want to keep them in the area of the project. So if you're, you know, up north at this time, it may be a little bit difficult to get you in, but you know, you can talk to us and see about that. Yes, sir. In Columbia, no, sir. Not he asked if there was a date for a meeting in Columbia County, and not at this time. We are working our way through counties, you know, to present the information to each county. And so there's not a particular order to it, but we are working to get to Columbia County. Yes, sir. And they're actually looking at Lafayette and pulling in some of those neighboring counties also. Yeah. Okay, so are there any more questions? So Dr. English, I believe he had some things he wanted to say about the project, and he had some binder information for you all.
Not so much about the project, but I want to mention the binders. I think you did an excellent job on explaining the project. Okay, now speak a little louder.
Okay, she said speak loud.
Okay, but one of the things that our forester did was he picked out some fact sheets. He picked out some fact sheets, some forestry fact sheets, and some other forestry information, and we put it in a binder. So what we'd like to do is give each family a binder. You know, these binders are free, but there's a lot of different forestry information in here. First of all, one of the things we have is people like to know about money. You know, how much can I make? Especially if you got somebody young involved. And we do want to get young people involved. It's called keeping it in the family. Well, at my age, you know, some of these trees take 35, 50 years, et cetera. It's for my family, it's not for me. So we actually want to get young people involved with that, okay? So we got the first thing that we're having is something about how much money you can make with a well-managed forest versus one that's not managed. And one of the things that I found out, I'm new in this, is that what a well-managed forest, and I'm talking about loblolly pine, takes about 35 years. An unmanaged forest, loblolly pine, it takes about 50 years, okay? So by managing it, you cut down on the time and you make twice as much money. But that information is in here also. The foresters may present something about some of the programs that will help you improve your forest land. And the program that we're mainly using is EQIP, okay? This program will help you put in stuff like timber stand improvements, thinning, site prep, you know, planting trees. Those are things that you may need to improve your forest. Well, there's also money through EQIP to help you put those practices in, okay? And right now, that cost share rate is 90% of the average cost. So if the practice costs you $100, the government will give you $90 of that. You should be able to find the 10%, okay, to help you improve your forest land. A lot of people don't know that, but these are some things that you would learn about this project, okay? Also, the first thing we want you to do is get a free forestry management plan through the Arkansas Forestry Commission, which is our partners. They are presenting today, okay? That cost is free, and it will identify the practices that you need, okay? So first thing we'd like for you to do is identify the practices that you need. After we identify those practices, we want you to sign up at the InterCS office to get cost share money to put those practices in. And we'll be here to help you every step of the way, okay? You just call us, we're just a phone call away, so it won't be that. But that information is in this booklet. Also, information on timber theft and just about everything you want to know about timber is in this booklet. We have a little bit of little information on wills, heir property, etc. Now, the other workshop that deals with heir property, etc., that's occurring in the auditorium. We do have a workshop going on in the auditorium now that deals with heir property and wills and etc. So that's another part of this project. But this booklet will give you some information on that. So I'm going to stop now and allow Evette to go on with the rest of the program. But we would like for each family to get one of these binders, each family, okay? Thank you.
And I want to first mention, you'll hear a lot of the word forestry. And so what forestry means is woodlands, woods, trees. That's the same thing. So you don't think you have to have, 100 acres or so forth for it to be forestry land. That's not the case. Was it 10 acres or more? 10 acres or more. That's what we're talking about, okay? All right, so our first speaker here is Doug Akin, and what he's going to do, we're keeping on the theme of keeping in the family. So we're going to be talking a little bit about family. And Doug Akin's going to talk to you about emotional ties to the land. And he's the Assistant State Forester for Management at the Forestry Commission.
So I've got a few slides I'm going to show, and I'm going to tell you all a little bit about some personal experiences I have with talking to landowners. First of all, I want to ask y'all, how many forest landowners are there here today? Okay, good. A lot of times I think forest landowners think forests occur somewhere else and not in their own backyard or not on their 40 acres or 10 acres or whatever. Like Evette said, if you own 10 acres or more, we consider that forest land. In Arkansas, I've got a slide up here just to get us a broad overview of forestry in Arkansas. Forest industry in Arkansas is a $6.3 billion value added impact, has a $6.3 billion value added impact to Arkansas's economy. The standing timber in Arkansas forest is estimated to be valued at more than $12.6 billion. And out of the 13 southern states, forestry makes the greatest contribution to Arkansas's economy. So before I move on to the next slide, who owns most of the forest land in Arkansas? Do y'all know? Take a guess. State. We have one state, and what did you say? Individuals. Anybody else? Who owns Arkansas's forests? Arkansas has 19.1 million acres of forest land in Arkansas, or about 58% of the state. So all you row croppers out there, there's more forest land, okay? 2.699 million or 2.7 million is federal government, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, mostly Forest Service. State and local is about 460,000. That'd be game and fish, wildlife management areas. Private, including corporate, is 15.3. About 61% of that private land, or 9.39 million, is what I call family forest land. That's y'all. Another interesting fact about forest land in Arkansas, incidentally, That last slide, as well as this one, comes from statistics from the National Woodland Owners Survey, which is a social survey that the U.S. Forest Service conducts of forest landowners across the U.S. So in this survey we find that, and there's a lot of demographic information about forest landowners in this survey, but about 68% of forest landowners are 55 years and over. Okay? So what that means to me is, like Evette was talking about, heirs property, there's going to be a huge transfer of land in the next, whatever, 10, 20, 30 years. Nearly 3/4 of our forest land is going to transfer in ownership to children, grandchildren, or whatever. Another interesting thing we learned from that National Woodland Owners Survey is that most of these landowners do not have a written forest management plan. They do not have a written forest management plan. One of our goals in the Forestry Commission is for landowners to have a written forest management plan. And that is good, so they'll have a path forward for managing their land. It's particularly good that they can pass that path forward on to the next generation. Again, 68% or 55 and over, so there's going to be a huge transfer of ownership from one generation to the next in the next few years. I think Trey is going to talk a little bit about this, but I've got 3 or 4 bullets up here. How do you get a forest management plan? The Forestry Commission, and we have some brochures here for this program. The Forestry Commission administers a program called Forest Stewardship Program. And that's a program where landowners can receive a written forest management plan that is a multi-resource plan if they're interested in wildlife, water conservation, soil conservation, timber. They can receive a written forest management plan for any of those. You can get a written forest management plan from a consulting forester. We also have a consulting foresters list on our website, and I've got it listed up there, arkansasforestry.org. And we also, on our website, have a publication called How to Sell Your Timber, okay? So I want to dwell on this how to sell your timber here for a minute, because I digressed from what Evette told me my topic was supposed to be, and that's emotional ties to forest land, and that was all introductory material to this, emotional ties to forest land. So increasingly, you know what Google is, right? Everyone knows what Google is. So around the world, if you Googled Arkansas Forestry Commission, guess we have different phone lines in our office, okay, direct lines. Everyone has their own number. Guess whose number came up when you Googled Arkansas Forestry Commission? It was mine. So I got calls from all over I never got an international phone call, but all over the U.S., okay? People Googled Arkansas Forestry Commission. I got calls about bats in attics and all kinds of strange questions, but when those that actually had a legitimate forestry question, probably the most common question was, and it was out of state, okay? People called me from out of state, California, Ohio, Michigan, Chicago, Illinois. Those were some of the common states. California, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, the Great Lakes area and out west were the 4 most common areas people would call me from. And it has tapered off, and I don't know why. Maybe it has something to do with the price of timber, but I would get 3 or 4 calls a week sometimes from these places. What were people asking? Someone wants to buy my timber. What do I do? That's what it was, okay? What do I do? Someone contacted me and wants to buy timber. So I would ask if I could be a little nosy and say, well, tell me about your land. How is it that you live in Cleveland, Ohio, and own Arkansas land in Ouachita County? And what do y'all think the answer was? Heir. A lot of times it was heir properties. A lot of times they had some kind of plan, and they were the only heirs to it. It wasn't heirs' property, and that they owned it with all their cousins, etc. So I would ask further questions. Have you ever been to it? Sometimes they would say yeah. Sometimes they would say no. Sometimes grandchildren had never even been to Arkansas and owned this land. More oftentimes than not, it was I would guess, I didn't ask them this, but I would guess it was a person in their 60s or so whose mother or father had just recently passed away and left it to him. I would assume it's 80 or 90-year-old had just left it to him. Sometimes it was a grandparent who left it to him, but consistently it was almost always someone in the 60s or 70s. Quite oftentimes they would say they may not have been from Arkansas, but they grew up going to their grandparents' land and they had fond memories of this place, okay? No, and they really didn't care about timber value, but they wanted to treat it right because that's what their grandparents did, or parents. Sometimes they grew up there too, but almost always moved away. No jobs in rural Arkansas for them, I guess, at least at that time. So, one thing I always say to them is, they were offered this big chunk of money, okay? They didn't know the value of it. They may not have ever been to it, but they had this emotional attachment to the land because it was their parents or grandparents. And they didn't know where to begin. Selling your timber, that publication is a good place to begin. I always told them, would you sell, if you have a car or a house, would you sell it to a person who told you the value of that car or the house? Of course not. Of course not. So why would you do the same with timber? I don't know, but it happens every day. Someone calls them, writes them a letter, and timber buyers go through the tax rolls at the courthouse. That's how they found these people from out of state. They go through the tax rolls. Happens every day. They'll shoot them a low number that might seem high in the tens of thousands of dollars to someone who's out of state who's never seen it or hasn't seen it since they were a little kid, and they'll take it. But it might be half of what it's worth. Again, don't sell timber to the person who's giving you the value, who's telling you what the value of that timber is. Have it independently appraised like you would a house. Like when I sold a car, a used car, I go to Kelley Blue Book, right? And look at the miles and condition of the car, and it tells me the approximate value. That's what I do, and that's how I sell a car. You need to have a timberland properly appraised, and a forester that you can find on our website, arkansasforestry.org, can tell you how to do that. And we have a consulting foresters list, and that, honestly, that's the way that your parents, grandparents, or these people's parents or grandparents would want them to do to take care of their land. Treat it right. Any questions so far? So there's that. That's one thing I always tell them. Know the value of your timberland. Second thing I tell them is to, after harvest, after they select, and we have a list of timber buyers on our website, but I always tell them to sell through a consulting forester. A consulting forester will take a % of the sale, so it's best in the consulting forester's interest for him to sell that timber at the greatest value possible to the highest bidder, because he'll make more money that way. Have a plan for what you're going to do after harvest, whether it's replanting or whatever, conversion of pasture, whatever. Have a plan. I like replanting. Maybe it doesn't need to be clear cut. Maybe it just needs to be thin. Have a plan. That consulting forester or our forest stewardship program can help you with that plan. And and also a plan could be available through, Dr. English mentioned EQIP. It could be available through EQIP. In order to get one of those plans, you really need to work with our local county forester. And this would be a good segue into me sitting down and letting our local county forester stand up and talk about what he wants to tell y'all. And I'm going to bring up his slideshow and let him talk to you now. Any questions for me? I hope I talked a little bit about what Evette wanted me to talk about, and also hit some topics I thought were important too.
Thank you, Doug. Doug did touch on emotional, ties to the property, and why I thought that would be important, because going with the theme of this workshop, keeping in the family, it made me think about my family and how we have heir property down in Louisiana. And this is land that my mother took me to, where I saw all my great aunts and uncles, and, we had a creek going through it and so forth. We had family reunions there. And so it has sentimental value to me. And I want that land to stay in my family, and a lot of my family feels that way. But it's tied up. So if we ever wanted to do something on that land, it would be difficult. And so we have to have the information to know how to go about getting it untied so that we can move forward. Because the land, a lot of times, will pay for things that you want to do. We would like to have a cabin out there. But if, it's kind of hard to get something on board. That's why I wish, this project was available in Louisiana, because if it was, we would be a part of that project. So there's another piece of land too that my mother owns, and it was given to her by her grandfather. Her grandfather worked that land, and he told her never to sell that land. And so, a way to honor him, she hasn't, and it's trees on that land right now. And so my mom, she has that same view. She said, my grandfather told me not to sell this land. And so in me honoring my mother, I'll make sure, and my sisters will make sure, that we never sell that land either. And it's always somewhere to go, okay? So the land is an asset, and I realized how hard my grandfather worked, and my grandparents worked to get that land and to keep it. And so I want to honor them by doing what I can, to keep it in the family. So we'll move on with the next topic, Your Land, Your Legacy, and that's going to be discussed by Trey Franks, and he is the Jefferson and Cleveland County Forester.
Like Doug and them were saying, I'm your local contact, and if you have any kind of questions, I've worked out in my two counties, and I've ventured out in my surrounding counties as well, just because I enjoy the job so much. But Trey Franks, Jefferson County, Cleveland County. All right, well, what's there to be discussed? We're going to discuss why landowners like forests, what does proper management look like, are my trees worth anything? It'll be real broad and quick on that. And then how would management benefit me? And obviously, how do we get started? Because that's the biggest question. That's probably why we're here. So, all right. Why do landowners like forest lands? It's simple. It's prettier to look at. The aesthetics of it. I mean, that's a real pretty stand right there. I mean, it's got to look better. If you've grown up on a forest land, that's what you prefer, and that's what you're going to like the best. Wildlife value on forest lands. You can manage your timber for an income, but wildlife's going to benefit it as well. Sentimental value, like was just discussed. If you've grown up on the property, you got ties to it. You know, if you lost a loved one, that's what you want to go back and see. I sat right here and I fished. If you had a creek or something, I fished here with my uncle or something, and then he's gone now. So, recreation. You can go hiking. You can camp, hunt, fish. You know, the possibilities are endless on a proper forest land. All right. The question is, can we manage our forests and still have all these things? Well, of course you can. All right. To hit on this, a clear cut, be sure you contact your local forester or a forester before you go and do this route, before you do a clear cut. Sometimes you have to go back and do a clear cut. If the property's been mismanaged for generations, and it's been high graded where they took out a lot of the saw timber and just left real low quality trees, then sometimes you have to go back to this. Or your management goals may have changed and you wanted a whole nother timber type, so you might have to go to this at some point. And it looks bad for a little while, but a couple years and it'll start looking great again. All right, I'm gonna go to, I'll put both these slides up at the same time. The one on the left, it's a proper managed forest, but you can kind of see, you could see quite a distance off in the woods. Usually when that happens, you probably need to start doing some kind of management. Wildlife has real limited coverage, real limited to forage on, so you probably, the tree density is probably getting a little too thick for that stand. Compared to the one on the right, you got little small pine seedlings coming up. You can maybe see 30 yards, and then there's grass and coverage, so that's perfect. That's perfect land right there. And it's a real nice, diverse stand. It's got pine and hardwoods on it as well. This is real popular timber type down in this part of the country, in this part of the state. We got a pine stand that needs its first commercial thin done really bad, and that's like what Dr. English was hitting on. That stand is just going to sit there stagnant and take years to be anything else. As soon as you get a harvest done and it'll turn into something like that, the trees will explode on growth and in size. It's in just one growing season, it'll really benefit. You'll really see it. All right. And compare those two. On pests and diseases, the one on the left, pests, wildfire, it's so much worse than that stand there. And wildlife can only use that for maybe coverage. It's a desert underneath it. There's no new growth, no anything for them to feed on. This stand here is it's an older stand, pine stand, which is great. It's been properly managed, but then it's looked like there's a management technique needs to be taking place now because the mid-story and the underbrush are starting to grow up too thick, so you need to do something. And one of the best practices we could do would come in with a control burn, and it would end up looking something like this, where it took out those undesirable tree species and knocked some of that head-high brush down back to knee-high where wildlife prefer it, and it'll be more new growth in the growing season. Yeah, there we go. That's the one I was looking for, comparing those two. All right, let's jump just real broad on tree worth. All right, you can see in 2012 where hardwood saw timber ended up bringing in more money than pine saw timber. For years, everybody's been growing pine just cut so quick to get up to where you can market it. But now, all those hardwoods that people were just cutting out thinking they were just trash trees, I guess, now they're regretting that because that's where the value's at. So keep in mind on that one, just in case you're sitting on a property and you're trying to figure out what you want to plant, you want to go to pine, you want to go to hardwood, you never know, so just stick with what you like the best. Don't just, oh, I want to plant pine because that's where the money's at. Well, you never know. You don't know which way the markets could go. Yes, sir.
If you need to take out some trees or something right now, you say, is it worth anything? Is it feasible to take it out? I know the price of it is almost like really low. What do you do?
Absolutely.
What do you do?
When you hit to that real thick stand,
Yeah.
you're just going to have to ignore the price.
Go ahead.
Don't
Yeah.
give it away, but sometimes you might have to, like right today, you might have to dang near give it away. But what are you going to do? You're going to let it sit there, and then pests is going to get in it, and it's going to destroy your timber, or it's just going to sit there stagnant. So you're going to lose some in the beginning if you go ahead and do that thinning, but then you'll gain it in the long run. It's just like we do commercial thinnings and pre-commercial thinnings. Sometimes you got to spend money for someone to go out there and do a pre-commercial thin, just let that timber lay, but you're gonna gain that in the long run of the stand.
When's the price going to go back up?
I have no idea. There you go. All right, this just kind of shows how timber's priced. It goes from a board foot, which is a 12-inch by 12-inch by 1 inch. That's a single board foot. This shows how sawmills utilize every bit of a tree that they have, so there's real minimal waste. All right, here's for example, you take a saw log a saw log is 16 foot long, and then just for example, there's a 16-inch diameter. That'll be 144 board feet. 7 logs is roughly 1,000, a little more, 1,000 board feet. Then 1,000 board feet equals 8 tons, and 8 tons is by $25 a ton is $200. So, like looking at this stand again, if you got 200 trees per acre, average 16 again, and then 80 tons per acre, so that's approximately $2,000 an acre, which a lot can affect that. If the site is a winter logging site where they could log it during the winter, where it's real rainy, the value would go up a little more. But then again, if they have to build roads and stuff like that, there's a lot to take in. All right, here's a good stand right here. This is a properly managed stand, but then again, you see the undergrowth and undesirables are coming in. The undesirable tree species are coming in. So what would we do for this? We would do a control burn. We'll do a control burn during the cooler seasons, usually when it's under 50 degrees out. And it would be like this, where all that old growth, all that old brush is gone, and the fire ran through and it'll kill those undesirable stems. And then when the growing season comes in, and it could look real similar to that with all the new grasses and stuff. So, and what can benefit on this would be you'd have quail, hopefully down in this part. You'd have quail come back. Of course, turkey is going to really love that because that's coverage, anything knee-high coverage for them to hide in, nest in. All right, there's always going to be a threat of having wildfire rush through your property. If you manage for it, put in control lines, your fire breaks, and burn it periodically. Then when a wildfire that was on someone else's property hits your property, it could really diminish it and reduce the threat of timber damage. On another note, if you leave it like that one stand that's real thick, we could have southern pine beetle, just one example. We haven't had this in the state in several years, and we hope with proper management it does not return. But here's a picture of what it could look like, and this would continue to spread, and it's good to have to teach your neighbor to do proper management, because if this came in on your neighbor's property for mismanagement, just because you managed real well, it could still move in on yours as well. But the only way to stop this would be put in a buffer zone on the outside of the infected area and that's usually 100 feet or so. So that's a lot of timber that's going to have to be cut down. And for this pest, you'd have to cut it down and leave it. But we have a local pest that's not this. It depends on the weather, how hard they'll hit the stand. But we have like an Ips beetle, and if they hit the stand, it's better to call us. We'll come out, we'll assess, and we'll tell you what kind of control method. Usually a control method for an Ips beetle attack would be you cut and remove, because that pest will stay and live on that down debris. I haven't had this in the state in the county in a couple years. The red oak borer, usually they'll attack, oaks of course, but usually the only thing attacking oaks now is probably oak decline or some kind of site damage. Either it's too close to a roadway, a driveway, and the site conditions have changed, and that's why oak's declining. All right, how do I get started? The best way to get started is to contact someone from the Forestry Commission. We work with consultant foresters there, and we work with the InterCS office, and we can get in touch with them and help y'all off in the right direction. Now, what we could do is like what was just hit on was a forest stewardship program where we'll come out, assess the property, and give you a forest management plan. Of course, it's free. And that way, in this plan, it will prioritize your goals. That way, because we want to know what kind of goals and objectives you have for this property. And multiple professionals develop this plan, Game and Fish, the InterCS office with the soil and water conservation, and then we're we oversee the plan and the program. So, all right, who's eligible for the Forest Stewardship Program? Private landowners who own at least 10 acres. Now, just because you own an acre of land, I still treat it the same way. You might not be able to get a stewardship program, but I can still come out and write a rural plan to satisfy your needs. All right, if you're managing for multiple resources, of course, you want timber and you want wildlife, or soil and water is one of your goals you want to reach for. This plan will be perfect for that. Another program we do is the Southern Pine Beetle Program. Who's eligible for this is landowners that have dominant pine stands that have not been thinned yet and are in need of thinning. Like, take me for example, I'd come out, I'd assess and approve on if we should submit you as for this program, and then it'll get approved, and funding is it might be there and it might not. So it's a first come first served program. So you just have to ask for it and just see if you can get it. It's another minimum 10 acres for a practice. All right, now for the EQIP that was discussed, the InterCS does this, and we can help. Who's eligible? All forest landowners are eligible for this, but it's an application process. They'll want to assess your resource concerns on your property after you go talk to them and get a hold of us. We'll write the plan up, and then they'll assess on if they want to approve the practices and funding for that property. All right. In summary, we discussed different management possibilities, the timber value real roughly, management practices, and different resource professionals. So.
All right, there's materials on the tables here. This is the stewardship brochure that was talked about on how to get a stewardship plan. And then this is general information about the Arkansas Forestry Commission. Trey talked a little bit about some insects that you may find on your property. This is another free service that the Forestry Commission provides. If you notice your trees are dying or got some type of weird fungus or something growing on them, you can contact the Forestry Commission and we'll come out, or they'll come out and take a look at it, or you can even send them a picture to find out what it is and how to treat it. So let me see. I've got a question for everybody. If someone was to ask you, what does keeping it in the family mean to you, would you know how to answer that question? If the answer is yes, then we done our jobs today.